Well, welcome back to Touchpoint, guys. I mean, the thing is, and Matt, you can tell me exactly what you've gotten out of it and everything like that, but the series we've been in, the Isn't She Lovely series, the series on the church, it's been good. It's been like refreshing in a way that's kind of interesting. I think church has always been this thing that, especially those of us who have grown up and been fortunate enough to know about God, know about the church as it relates to Christianity. I wouldn't say we've taken it for granted, but as we've kind of grown up, there's been always these kind of questions that loom around it and how it functions and things like that. And I've just been excited that we've, as a church, dug into the series.
Oh, it has been. And it's been, I think, even something unique now, I think, because of looking at God's word, but also then recognizing just the nuances of everybody does have a different background or a story. And for some that they grew up in the church and others are here maybe as adults and this is their first time, right? I can think of a handful of those who are newer around here that they didn't grow up in the church. And so those two different experiences, and obviously, right, God's word is the truth and what shapes us.
Exactly.
But we can still, right, he's a good father. And so we can bring our experiences and he doesn't just shove them away, but it helps to inform, okay, here's where he's leading me. Here's how he wants to guide me and shape me. And so I think, I've just loved that of us being able to hold up God's word as truth. And also just the reality of, hey, we do have different experiences. And unfortunately, we know because of sin, the world is broken and there is brokenness in the church. And that's not making light or excusing anything, but it's saying, we as humans do hurt and sin against one another, and we need to repent and reconcile, but let's be sure that doesn't cause us to run away from God or from his church.
Exactly. And so all of that, I think, between what I was saying about people that maybe repeatedly been in it, saturated in it, and maybe not stopped to think about stuff, and then what you're saying about people having different experiences, even though they all have a church name listed on the front of the building. So it's been really exciting to do that, and I'm glad that we're doing that as a church. The cool part you just mentioned is how we all have different experiences. And so kind of using that as a springboard to get into what we're doing today is we have one of our awesome congregation members. His name is Tom Craig. If you don't know Tom, you need to make a point to get to know Tom. He's a great guy. But he's going to be just asked a couple questions in an interview style format for us just to learn a little bit about what his perspective of the church has been, both in the past, big church as far as like big C or little C church, his experience at North Canton Chapel, or his just perception of the church at large. So let's just go ahead and take a look at that.
So my name is Tom Craig, and I've been an attendee at the chapel for 8+ years now, and I've found it as my home. So kind of like even how I landed here was because like just coming to the chapel, I really felt like walking in the doors that I was fully embraced, and you could really feel the movement of the Holy Spirit. And I travel an hour to get here, so it's quite a journey. A lot of people question that, and but the purpose in that is because I feel like there are a lot of churches out there that are what I would refer to kind of sleepy, and they get complacent in their walks. And I'm a very advocate for local and global missions, and here obviously the chapel welcomes that. Sometimes I feel like other churches, they're not so inviting to kind of join forces, but we're all in the same team, we're all together. And sometimes I've seen glimpses of where it comes together and we work as a community of believers and spreading the gospel, and sometimes I've sadly seen it to where we've not exercised that well. So I think obviously we can take examples of that from God when he first designed man, and the first word that would come to mind would be he was very intimate, and the second would be like he's intentional, and he built and designed us for a purpose, and we're called to obviously serve and serve for him, but not just for him, but also serve others. And we get to see that in Jesus through the Gospels and how he relates to individuals, and he doesn't allow himself to get distracted and off course. In fact, sometimes he takes courses completely around what would be a simpler course of action. And I think leading back to the other question, sometimes we can get complacent and we want the easy way, and that's not what he calls us to do. Yeah, I kind of think like the disciples, when Jesus called the disciples, like three things: they made themselves available, they were teachable, and they later applied it. But it all happened in time. So I guess like the first thing I'd probably say is just make yourself available, just show up, and be patient and be observant, and listen for God's calling. And I think of a scripture verse from James in chapter 4, verse 8, where as we draw near to him, he draws near to us. And that would for somebody new coming into the church and everything like that, and knowing those things, just make yourself available and have an ear to listen, and listen for God. So, yeah, good question. So there, I would hope that we create an atmosphere that's very welcoming, and that they would see that different, and especially, they're most likely coming because they've gone through situations and everything like that, and they've searched elsewhere for answers, and this is kind of their last hope. So they walk through the doors, and they don't know God, and in some cases, I believe like God, one of the greatest gifts that he gives us is our testimonies, and to be able to humanly relate to people. Because it can be intimidating when you walk through the doors, and they probably don't feel worthy. And I do believe it is our job to create an atmosphere and everything to express to them, like, no, you are worthy, and that we level up. We don't, put ourselves at a higher tier. We come lowly and gently, like Jesus did. So.
Well, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, kind of prior to the video coming in, if you don't know Tom, just make an effort to get to know him, say hi, shake his hand, and see how he's doing. But I mean, he said a ton of things there, Matt, that I think are totally worth hashing out. And I mean, to just kind of rattle them off in the same fashion that he did.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny when you first begin to talk to people about their perception of the church, like, especially if they are a professed Christian, I find more often than not, people only want to harp on the good things, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because if we enjoy the community and the body of Christ that we're in, we should actually celebrate that. We should like and enjoy that.
For sure.
But just like our process of sanctification as an individual person, if you kind of like zoom out and ask yourself, is there something to be learned inside of that when it comes to the community of believers? And so he talked about this idea of the church being sleepy, or some churches that he's experienced being sleepy. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it was interesting because he was, in reference to, driving an hour to get here.
Yeah,
so that's a lot.
Which he does do.
Which is fascinating. But then you sit with this idea of, there are a lot of churches out there. And so I think for some, and maybe who are listening or watching, it's how do I find that space? And so I just loved his heart behind that of thinking deeper. And I think even in that, it's, not trying to call out based on a preference or something, but it was this, what precedes in him talking about the church's idea of the church is alive. And so I think even that idea of, sleepiness is when I think of that, it's like you're just kind of there and going through the motions, but there's not this intention and discernment. It's probably a lot more, I think, at times when I'm tired, I'm more reactive versus this proactive and knowing, hey, here's what I'm gonna do. And so I think there's beauty in that search for a church that you say, okay, there's this activity, and not just there's a lot of events to go to. Right. Hearing him talk and hearing that heart of, okay, the care for the world. Right. He talked about, local and global, and that the church is beyond just, hey, here's what happens in this building, or just for us if you're here, but this No, outside of that, as we gather and then we're scattered into those places. And I think that's this idea that I heard as he was talking about, which is spot on as you look at, right, the church in Acts, right? We talked about that in week 1, and just as they started, but then there was all this activity as they gathered together in homes and they're in the temple, but then there was this activity that they were doing in their community and their places around them.
Yeah. And so, I mean, to that point into, like, I'll take 2 steps back to get right with you, is that you mentioned this idea of, it didn't feel like when Tom was talking about this idea of sleepiness, that there was even a trace of the idea of him talking about preference-based things, not like how bright are the lights, you know, what's the worship like. He very much was drawn to calling attention to both the connection with God and what are we doing in light of the connection that we have, which your reference to Acts Church, totally with you. One of the things that, and Tom would hate it if I mentioned this, one of the things that I find interesting about Tom is that he is very invested in the communities he's in, even to the point that when the majority fall away from those communities, but he still sees a need in those communities, he stays fervent and true to it. We joke with him a little bit about how he's very, for his age and his demeanor and everything like that, it almost seems funny in some ways how diligent he is to attending to widows. Why is that weird to us? I don't know. And it's awesome to see Tom being one of the several people that I can think of at our church that does actually have a true call to action on their lives, but at the same time too is gently wondering if everyone else in the church and adjacent churches are doing the same thing. And at no point in time do I feel like his words were explicitly condemning. I think it's one of those things that he just feels a burden and conviction for a hurting world. And I think that's when you pray for God to give you eyes for the things he sees, that's what happens.
That's so good. I think that is, like, to be able to recognize, right, and be a part of what God is doing, and move into that space where you can, and a part of in, like, the local church, but the connection with, you know, he mentioned some of that of having a right view of the church global as a whole, and that there is this partnership. I think sometimes we can get so afraid, you know, and he kind of alluded to this, maybe not in that way. He talked about the beauty in seeing moments where churches or the church as a whole comes together, and other times where maybe those opportunities don't happen. But I think that is beautiful as we think about this, you know, because even this idea of, right, we have our missions partners.
Right.
But this is an essential, it's not like about us, we're somehow better because we're here in America and we're sending money this way. It's this partnership of the church, of, right, the church that's in Guatemala, and the church that's in the Dominican, and the church that's in all these other countries and spaces, and not just we're somehow better off or whatever. And so I think there's the beauty in that. And I know even Tom, because he's gone and been a part of the work that God's doing in, I think it was in Dominican or Guatemala somewhere. I remember from editing photos of all the teams in the annual report last year. But I think that's that beautiful picture of us coming alongside and celebrating, and right, that they're praying for us and we're praying for them, and it's this partnership, and that's beautiful. And I think that is even that the idea of the local needs of caring for the widows and orphans, like that's biblical. Right? That's just saying this is what God's word says, and I just want to be obedient to it. And as a church, it's sad that if we think that's odd, it shouldn't be. It should be that's normal.
Yeah, it should be. And that kind of like dovetails very easily into kind of what Tom's whole kind of stance was relating to, if I were to want to get involved in a church, what would you want me to know? The typical things is that you would hope for people to say is just like, you know, get involved in groups, get involved in these things, which are very, like, to people that work in ministry, it sounds like it just comes natural to suggest and talk about those kinds of things. But Tom kind of took this approach of saying, and I made a joke before we were preparing to kind of make this conversation happen. It's just like, it's almost like he's taking this idea of, you know, ask not what your church can do for you, but what you can do for your church. Because it is like, you know, if the community isn't explicitly designed to just give you stuff all the time, you approach church much differently. You believe strongly that, you know, your testimony, which is the thing he talked about. He said that, you know, your testimonies are one of the greatest gifts from God, and what you do with it is, you know, between you stewarding it with what God's given you. And so I think that his approach to what he would want people getting involved with the church to know is kind of interesting, because he's saying, you know, pray consider. Be open-hearted to what God's drawing you towards. Just be available. Be there. I forget what he said exactly. He said there were three things relating to how the disciples came to Jesus. I forget the words he used exactly, but it was all relating to being available in some capacity, whether it was being teachable, relatable, or just in community together. And he said it came in time. I remember that. But all to say is that it was very much in a posture of like, I'm here to be used more so than I am to use you.
Yeah.
Which is kind of wild.
No, and but that ties right into where, I mean, we've talked about this idea of the church being a body.
Right.
And bearing with one another, right? Showing honor to one another, coming alongside that we feel in those moments where, right, if my foot's in pain, I feel that.
Yeah.
And so that's the same sense of, okay, and I'm not, I barely remember like science class. I'm having to like relearn as my kids are like getting up there in school. But I'm pretty sure like that's usually what happens, like the body, like, so if there's an infection, right? You're like systems in the body go to work to fight off that infection in that part. And so it's that same thing of like, okay, this person's hurting. I'm going to step in. Right. Not because it's not because of something like I'm so noble, right? It's just like, this is what we do because we are this body, this church. And I think that is hard.
Right.
And I think everything is talking about why it's so hard is because specifically for us, if we're watching or listening and we're in the United States, so much is individual centered.
Absolutely.
And we have to fight against that mentality and mindset of like, this isn't the YMCA.
Yeah.
Right? I don't come here because I'm trying to get like swole or whatever. Like that's a
I don't know that we go to the Y for that anymore, but I hear you.
I don't know. And that's where I'm dating myself because that's like, people don't say that anymore. So whatevs. But it's the same thing where you don't go or like, I'm going to go this is my favorite burger joint. So I'm going to go here. Right. It's not like this competition. It's this, like this is the body of Jesus.
Absolutely.
As we gather here. And so I love that emphasis there that he was saying, hey, of meeting people where they are. He talked about that idea of like welcoming and not about I'm at this higher level. When you talk about Jesus, gentle and lowly, and so stepping in. And so I think that's that beauty there.
Yeah. And you kind of went straight there is when he was talking about the gentle and lowly coming to others in the same way that Jesus did to us. That was when he was referencing, what do you want the church to know about receiving someone new? And that's when you were kind of talking about this idea of, it fights off your body fights off the bacteria or whatever it might be. I guess the thing is too, is that not to reuse your analogy, but it is just like, I feel like sometimes people feel like when they come in that they are not as readily accepted in. And I hate that. Like, I hate it because, in a lot of ways, growing up in the kind of more traditional church settings, it was weird for me being the tattooed kind of cat to come back and visit home again. Cover that up, man. We're not allowed to have tattoos showing on this podcast scenario, whatever we call this. But all to say is that it is kind of wild that the church that is professed meant to be the place of acceptance and where you need a home to find community at is one of the harder places to always, see it that way. And so in the same way that Tom was saying, it's just like, we need to find others in the same place that Jesus found us, which was not always perfect, not always how we would have preferred. And we just need to understand that, similar to how Tom said, we don't know the scenario. We don't know what brought him here. And we can make assumptions, but the crazy part is you don't have to assume if you just get with them, get involved, learn, and can care for them the same way God does.
Yeah, that's such a good word, such a good reminder. Yeah, as you're talking, I remember he was talking about, he's like, for a lot, there's those that come as a last, right? This is my last hope. And so I think there's something about like, right, quick to listen, slow to speak. Right? And James talks about that. And that is such a word to sit with. And that's where we miss out on, right? Because Jesus is God, and so he knows everything. He knows everyone. And I think sometimes we can just jump to that assumption instead of saying, well, wait, I'm not Jesus. So actually, if I haven't sat down with someone, I don't know their story. I don't know the pains that they're carrying that maybe they mask with something else. But I do know the one who can meet them in that, who can give them life, the only one who can. And that's Jesus. And, that's what all this is about as we gather. It's all about Jesus. And so, it's just beautiful getting to just hear from him about, the way that God has worked and just those important reminders for us of the church in all its facets as we seek to make much of Jesus, as we step into to follow after him in the work that he's doing here and the work that he's doing across the globe, and meeting people, because the church is alive and God is still moving and his kingdom is still at work, and he's drawing people to his name. And we need to not forget that. I think that's where when we get sleepy, we forget that God is not done. And his kingdom is not done, and he is still drawing people to his name. And so are we going to be attentive and listen and respond to that? Or are we going to be comfortable with who's with us and start falling asleep?
Yeah. And I feel like that is a great position to kind of end things on. It's just this idea of, look, the only reason why you're going to forget what you're supposed to do is if you somehow think that the work's been done. And that's obviously not the case. We wouldn't have the jobs and care and ministry we try to pursue if that wasn't the case. And I think that realistically, if you're a member of the North Kent Chapel, an attendee, an onlooker, anything in between, the really awesome part about being a Christ follower is that God invites us into being a part of the work that he's doing. And that's an opportunity. It's not explicitly a burden, but it is a thing that we need to take seriously and move forward on. So, but looking at Tom's story and his just reflection over his experiences both in this church and otherwise, like it was very insightful, and it was good to hear from somebody other than somebody that's on staff about this stuff. And so next week we're going to be looking at Amber Schaefer, which is going to be really exciting to hear what she has to say too. So if you've been checking this out, just tune in again next week, and we'll see you then.